Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's episode, I'd like to talk about Remco Evenepoel. But before we get into the Belgian Wonder Kid, I want to let all the Patreon subscribers know that we have a Q&A video coming up for YouTube. If you want your questions answered, make sure you get them in by February 10th. Now, today's video, Remco Evenepoel is back on the bike. We see in Strava that he's got 2 weekend rides there of about 40 miles each. So the Belgium kid is outside training. Now that doesn't mean he hasn't been doing some training on the trainer before that. But as we know officially right now on the bike, Remco Evenepoel's got 2 days in the back pocket. Now, when I start looking at his YouTube videos that he filmed in the middle of January, it shows him there at the physio in the gym training, and he's on the rowing machine. Talks about how he still has some stiffness and soreness from his crash in early December. But when you're on the rowing machine and you're working that shoulder, that tells me that it looks pretty good for him to be able to start training. And along with his 2 days outside in Belgium, posted up on Strava, that tells me that he has a ton of time to start getting ready for the Spring Classics. Now, we go over the pro cycling stats and we look at what his objectives are at the beginning of the season. We see it's the Prijzenpijl, Amstel Gold, Flèche Wallonne, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. I shouldn't have to remind you viewers that he won Liège-Bastogne-Liège a couple years ago, so we know that's a big objective, being a Belgian kid racing in Belgium at one of the monument races. Now, the one question I have, though, about Remco Evenepoel's starting at the classic races, the one-day races, I think, are the hardest races you can do in the world in terms of just tearing your muscles up and putting some hurt into you. I think it's very complicated to go from zero racing and that 6 weeks of time of recovery from the crash in December into going straight into the classics. I would prefer, if I was his director sportif, that he starts possibly at the Basque Country. Now, we start looking at the Basque Country. When that race starts on April 7th, it's a week-long race, and he has about a week recovery before he would go over into Amstel Gold. If you're talking about having the form of winning Liège-Bastogne-Liège, or even winning the Prijzenpijl, starting the Basque Country for training doesn't sound like too tall of an order. I think I'd like to see the Prijzenpijl taken off his calendar and then the Basque Country, or if he's not quite ready for the Basque Country, then maybe it's time to go over and do a Abruzzo over in Italy. That'd be a little bit easier of a stage race than the Basque Country, if not a lot easier, but a few less days of racing, but a little bit closer to, of course, the classics of Amstel Gold, Flèche Wallonne, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège, where he only has 2 days of recovery in between Abruzzo and Amstel Gold starting, versus if he does the Basque Country, you get a week of racing in the legs and then a week of recovery before you start the Spring Classics. Now, the big thing I worry about, Tadej Pogačar, which means that you're going to be doing a lot of pulling on the bars and a lot of searching to find every ounce of power out of your body. What does that mean? That means for sure he's going to put his shoulder and his ribs and everything in the upper body that was affected from the crash in December into 100% functioning to be able to survive on Tadej Pogačar's wheel when he gets into Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But that race there is one Tadej Pogačar you got to follow. But the big but is when you go into the classics, coming out of all those corners is what Remco Evenepoel is going to force his body to go through when he starts racing at the classics. So back the film up a little bit. Let's start at the Basque Country. Let's go to the Basque Country and not race it 100% to win. Let's focus on getting there and just continuing the form to rise and use it for some nice training. Let's say he lives down in Spain. Oh, that's right. He does live down in Spain. So it's an easy transfer going from the south of Spain up to the north of Spain there in the Basque Country to start that. That's half a day's drive. How do I know? Well, I live down there in Denia, and it's a half a day drive to do it. I know because I did it in my Volkswagen Corrado many times. So it's an easy transfer, so he doesn't have to lose any training, doesn't have to get on a flight. He can drive his car straight up there to the north of the Spain and start the Basque Country, and then he can decide after stage 1 and stage 2 and 3 how he's feeling. If he's really capable of winning Liège-Bastogne-Liège, you should be able to finish the Basque Country and at least ride into your form if you're coming into the hardest week of racing in the calendar outside of the Tour de France. It's going to be Amstel, Flèche, and Liège. For any GC rider, that is the hardest week of racing for sure, no doubt about it, with the exception of the first week in July. So I believe the best way when you look at the calendar, 2 months he has to get ready for Basque Country. And if you can't get ready in 2 months, most likely you're not going to get ready to win Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So if I'm Remco Evenepoel, I'm checking out the schedule right now, and I'm thinking De Prince-Pil's not the perfect way to start at the Classics and then go straight into Amstel, Flesch, and Liège. Start at the stage races. It's always a bit calmer at the stage races. Yes, I've said the Basque Country, and I won the Basque Country, so I know what it's like to be up there racing. I think it's the hardest stage race, week-long stage race in the world. But if you're just going to sit up on the penultimate climb or 3 climbs before the finish and ride in with a group of 20 or 40 riders on the hard stages, you'll get the training in your legs, the recovery, and the progress of your form will continue to come up. But if he's already on 100% form, well, he'll be ready for the Basque Country, and then he has a week's worth of recovery, a couple more training days you can fit in during that week to get you ready for Amstel Gold. Then it won't be such a shock to the body going straight to the Classics if you can start a stage race. Remember, as I already said, if you can't start the Basque Country, you could wait a couple more days and you could go up to Abruzzo and they can start racing up there if Soudal Quickstep want to put a team registered into that race at this moment. That race will finish the same day that we look over there at the Prince-Pil would, which would only leave him 2 days, but it'd be a little calmer racing there, and you'd get a few more days to build your form up where the start of the Basque Country is a little earlier. You can start there a little later, but starting at the Classics is going to be a tall order for the Belgian rider. Now we know if he's 100%, he can go straight into the Classics, but why take the risk? Drop over to one of the stage races where you can get a little calmer build up to it other than the Classics. He's going to have to look after his form and his weight a ton during this 2 months. When I go into his own YouTube video, I'd say he's just a little bit heavy. A little bit heavy for certain for the Classics and the biggest, hardest week of racing in the world up there at Amstel, Flesch, and Liège. But when we're talking about the Tour de France, his #1 objective, I'm not so worried about that, but he's going to have to get even leaner. But the Classics, you could still carry that extra kilo to possibly even 1.5 kilos over what you'd have to be at the Tour de France, maybe even 2 kilos if you got the legs that Remco Evenepoel has throughout his career. But at this moment, Remco Evenepoel's program has to be spot on to get him ready for those spring Classics. And I don't think starting at the Prince-Pil is the best way to do it. But then again, I've never had the legs of Remco Evenepoel in the Classics either. So maybe the Wonder Kid has something beautiful set up. In this moment, though, it looks like he's ready to start training hard. So keep an eye out on his Strava stuff when he posts there. When we start looking at the rest of the world, well, Filippo Ganna, I'm going to want to bring up his Strava too, because Filippo Ganna, the Ineos rider, he just got done beating none other than Remco Evenepoel's Strava record up Col d'Arantes. So Ineos have something in the horizon there for Filippo Ganna starting the 25 season where he's not doing the track racing and all that stuff that's normally interrupted his road scene. We might see Filippo Ganna back at his best. Now, will he win Milan-San Remo? Well, you know right now the Italian rider is focused 100% to go into with a shot at winning Milan-San Remo. And right now, when you see his Strava record beating smaller climbers, remember, when we're looking at Filippo Ganna, he's over 80 kilos. Remco Evenepoel is nowhere near 80 kilos. So that was a great result to look at from Filippo Ganna, even though it's just a Strava record. It's a substantial Strava record that tells all of us fans sitting on the Chesterfield that Filippo Ganna is 100% focused for the 25 season. The Butterfly Effect's just around the corner. The big races are starting over in Europe. In fact, they start tomorrow. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys for the Butterfly Effect real soon. And for all the Patreon subscribers, make sure you send in your questions before February 10th so we can set up that video to be released up on YouTube. I'll see you guys on the next video real soon.